Chapter 11, Twisted Metal. Guess we're gonna find out what that noise was. The storm lasted another full day before it began to clear. The lightning had eased by the afternoon of the second day, but the wind was still severe and visibility almost nothing. It was early on the third morning when Virio and Lynette took their heavy truck and drove Finch back to Kinesi, the nearest city. They took two of their crew, including Eden, with them. The rest stayed until the wind had almost completely died down. We had seen them off, wishing them a safe journey. They had carried Finch, whose condition was unchanged, out to the truck while the wind was still high. I stood near the door, watching as they got him situated. There was another round of anxious hugs and farewells. Finch was stable, and we had no reason to believe they wouldn't reach Kinesi safely, though. I made sure to tell Eden we wanted to know as soon as possible. He assured us he would contact us when they reached the city, and again if there was any news about Finch. Lynette gave me a rib-crushing hug and thanked me again. She promised they'd be back, Finch too, to finish with the research site. We watched them until they were no longer in sight. The remaining members of their team waited for the storm to clear before they left for the evaluation campsite. Their goal was to check on everything there, then head to Kinesi themselves. Most of their supplies and cargo had been packed away into a sturdy shelter. That shelter had taken a little damage, but most of their important equipment was fine. Anything that hadn't been stowed or tied down was gone. They expected it, since it had all been done in a rush. We only heard about it because they contacted us right before they left for Kinesi to give us an update. Well, at least no lives were lost, including Finch, so that's good. Lance and I were already surveying the damage to his place and cleaning up by that point. It looked like a war had taken place. Everything was covered in dust. I coated everything in a thick, muddy layer that hinted at rain I hadn't even realized the storm dumped on us. There were small twigs and branches strewn about and tossed around. The fire pit was filled with sand, and several trees damaged beyond saving. The pool had been covered, but even that wasn't enough to keep all the dirt out. Two of Lance's wind sculptures had been twisted, broken, and blown over. Dang. I was upset about that, but he shrugged it off, saying that it happened sometimes. The greenhouse was fine. I was glad of that. Aside from being a source of fresh food, Lance treasured it. So I was glad to clean the sand off the glass and get it looking nice again. The strangest thing we found was that a window in Lance's observation room had been badly cracked. The windows were made to withstand considerable force. That something had almost broken through was surprising. I wonder if that was the noise. Morgan's like, "You think that was the noise?" Do you think that was the crash we heard?
It could have been part of it. I suppose it was caused by debris. But it's pretty high for the wind to lift something. It's also not on the right side of the building. But sometimes storms like that have small eddies where the winds rotate at high speeds. It could have been something like that.
Yeah, but you phrasing it that way makes me think it wasn't that, so what does that mean for us?
I'm just surprised there's no sign of what hit it.
The wind was pretty wild. I guess it could have been anything.
Well, strange things can happen during storms. I'll probably have to arrange for help to repair that one. We'll keep the interior panel closed for now. My biggest concern is the damaged turbine. I'll have to get that fixed today. I don't want to drain more battery power than is necessary.
Do you need help with it? If not, I can just focus on cleaning everything up. There was a lot of raking and picking up to be done.
The turbine is manageable. I fixed worse. I think it'll be more efficient if we work on different things. What's the saying? Divide and conquer.
That is a saying, but that's not what it means. But I'm fine with cleaning up, so I'll work on getting that done. That was how most of the day was spent. I had no idea how Lance managed the sort of thing alone for all these years. With one person, it would have taken a couple of days. While he worked to fix the turbine, I did my best to gather up all the debris and carry it to a large pile. There was an enormous piece of a tree that had come from somewhere. It took me 5 minutes of fighting with it and dragging it before I remembered the whole telekinesis thing. I heard Lance laughing all the way from where he was working. Shut up! The work went much faster after that. It was good practice, actually. Once I realized I could sweep the dust off things in an instant with my telekinesis, it was almost, dare I say, fun. Though using my Psi didn't mean it wasn't tiring in its own way. And since Lance was busy, I also worked in the neglected greenhouse, watering, noting what was wilted, and cleaning up in there as well. Around lunch, we got a message from Eden saying they had reached the city and Finch was undergoing treatment and repairs. The prognosis was good. Hooray! We were both relieved to get a positive update.
It looks much better than it did this morning. You made more progress than I would have in the same amount of time. Once you remembered you didn't have to do it the hard way.
I elbowed him playfully in the side. I put all the twigs and branches in a pile there. The bigger ones I added to the rack where you keep the logs for the fire pit. There were some odd bits I found here and there. I put all the metal over here. I led him to the side of his habitat where I'd organized a surprising assortment of metal parts, including a twisted fork, and several bent pieces of metal with what looked like scorch marks. I had no idea where they could have come from.
I'll be able to recycle those and use them for something else. What's that cloth?
No idea. It was just hung on a shrub. I can't imagine how far the storm must have carried it.
I've found some pretty strange things after storms through the years, so I'm not surprised. With the turbine repaired and the cleanup done, did you want to go to the ruins to check on it? I know the team already looked, but there may be some cleanup to do there as well.
I thought about that. If there's any debris there, it might be good to gather it up now before it gets scattered. More than it is.
You're not too tired to walk there?
I'll be fine. So we headed that direction, hand in hand. The ruins themselves would be fine, I knew. They would have weathered hundreds of such storms in the centuries they'd been there. Which didn't mean there was no possibility for damage. But I wanted to see it anyway. And, like I said, if there was any scattered debris, it would be good to clean it up now instead of leaving it. We were both a little tired from working and cleaning all day, but our pace as we walked was unhurried and slow. It took longer than usual to reach the site, but neither of us minded. This is where I teleported to the other day, right in front of the entrance.
Probably the safest area.
It felt that way to me, too. The caves looked much the same as they did. The sand was piled higher in some places, and there was debris there as well, little sticks, twigs, and leaves sticking out of the sand. I could only imagine how the wind would have been howling through them during the storm. As expected, the ruins were also fine. Most evidence of the camp was gone aside from the structure with the equipment. They'd left it behind, of course. There was still a scorch mark from the lightning bolt and fire. It was obscured with a layer of sand and dust. I cleared a bit away with my foot, amazed at the scorched branches working their way out from the center. They were etched deep in the stone, blackened and burned, like a strange tree. Unable to stop myself, I stooped to let my fingers rest against it, tracing the branches. It was fascinating, beautiful, and a terrible testament to the power of nature.
He is fortunate to have survived.
Do storms often come up with so little warning like that?
Not always. But during a bad storm season, it happens.
If they hadn't been trying to clean up the camp and get things stowed away, they probably could have got to shelter before the lightning was as much a threat. They need a better protocol if the storm season is going to be like this.
Perhaps you can help them come up with one.
I doubt I'm equipped to. We were on our way back to the house when it happened. Lance and I were going through the cave system back the way we had come when I felt a slow tingle start at the base of my spine and work its way to my skull. Danger? Every hair on my arms and neck stood on end at once. Yep, spidey sense. I was feeling really this ominous feeling the entire time this chapter was going. I'm like, well, this is strange and this is odd, but I mean, it could be explained by this odd storm thing, you know. We won't question it too much. I'm like, there's a lot of well, perhaps, and maybe this, and it could be that. I'm like, is it though? Is it? And a powerful feeling of danger and threat smacked me in the face. I grabbed Lance by the arm, looking around and expecting to see something like that brush leopard again. Lance! Something's nearby.
What?
There was Oh no, is it the Terminator? Oh god, it's the Terminator! There was a heavy thump above us, the dragging and scraping of metal. Then something heavy dropped down right next to us. I barely registered in my mind that it was the robot, or one like it, that had attacked Jack's car in the tunnel. It was damaged, sparking, and already powering up a weapon. So it's just been out here? Good grief. We gotta teleport immediately.
Behind me!
In a quick movement, Lance pushed me behind him and held out a hand. The robot collapsed. Nice, I forgot that you could do that. Very good reflexes on that. Whew, and it was over like that. I almost didn't have time to react to any of it until my legs gave out and all the horror of that day returned full force. My arms went around my body and I stared at it, shaking. The only words in my head were, "They found me." I didn't even realize Lance was crouching beside me, talking until he lightly shook my shoulders and called my name. For a moment, panic and anxiety threatened to overwhelm, but I snapped out of it and looked at him, letting out a ragged breath.
Morgan, are you alright?
I don't know. My throat was tight with a growing lump that made it difficult to speak. Lance pulled me into a hug, squeezing tight. Though he smelled of sand and sweat rather than the normal, comforting wet soil and floral scent, it still gave me comfort. More firmly grounded, my frazzled nerves and the panic from before almost instantly settled. What do we do?
We need to get it back to the house. I want to scan the information inside. It was almost definitely recording. I need to know what it saw and who it was sending that information to.
Good call.
We don't know if it's the only one, so I'd rather do it there than here.
All right. That makes sense.
Can you carry it?
I know a faster way to get us back.
Are you sure you can manage it?
Yes. I let out another breath and nodded as I pulled away from him. Yes, I can.
Then it might be best to get us back as fast as possible.
I don't know much about how other knights teleport, but I have to warn you, the only method I know is pretty terrible the first time around.
Ariel Vaughn. He travels by folding space. I've heard about it. You mimic his technique, so I would expect dizziness, nausea, and so on.
As long as you're prepared. I took a few slow breaths to help myself focus. As much as I did not want to touch that thing, and I half wanted to give it a good kick to make sure it was really dead, I set my hand on it, grabbed Lance's wrist, then I targeted the spot in his front yard I knew I could reach safely. Well, she did it much faster this time. It wasn't as bad as the first time I teleported carrying someone. There was still the weight of them dragging me as I carried us to the target area. But it didn't take as long, and we were back in a very literal flash. It only took Lance a moment to recover. Then he carried the broken machine to his workshop, and I followed behind. I paused once to glance out across the landscape, wondering who was out there still searching for me.
Nyx is an arm of the Delphinian government. We've talked about them before. It was one of theirs, as I expected. They did a pretty decent job of trying to erase all identifying marks, but it's not quite good enough when I can track where it's sending information.
Okay, so it's Nyx. Nyx is our antagonist, eh? Delphine again. I almost want to commend them for being this determined. Mostly I want to just kick them, though, collectively.
It seems like it's been looking for you since the explosion. Just one of them, I think. They probably figured it was the best way to avoid detection. Not the most effective way to find someone, but they worked methodically. It's just been covering a search grid bit by bit and lucked out that it went the direction you did.
Oh, lucky me.
It first caught sight of you the day of the storm. It looks like it had homed in on the campsite because it picked up human activity there and was observing when you showed up.
If I hadn't gone there that day, it might have never realized I was in the area.
Perhaps. But if you hadn't gone there, Finch wouldn't have survived.
I covered my face with my hands, letting out a heavy breath. So it tracked me back here.
I believe it was trying to get inside during the storm, but was unsuccessful. It took heavy damage and went into a dormant state to wait it out.
That's what the noise was. Okay.
It tracked us to the caves and caught a brief image of my face. I'm not sure if it sent that back or not.
Oh, great, so they know about you too. Oh, this is just wonderful.
It was in the middle of transmitting the last data batch when I shut it down. But Nyx will recognize me if they see me.
I do feel this way, but it's not, and we're not emotional, so let's not be emotional, let's be productive. What do we do about it? I swallowed hard when he said that, the enormity of that realization hitting me full force. What are our options? I was doing my best to stay calm, but it wasn't looking good. I didn't feel like I'd been careless. Maybe too confident in my ability to pick up and simply live life here, though. Too confident in the size of the waste preventing them from being able to track my location. I mean, Lance has been hiding out here for a while, so it's not like you had any reason to believe you couldn't also hide out here for a while. And now I had endangered Lance as well as myself.
It depends a lot on what Nyx does. First, we know the robot was sending information back. That doesn't mean it's being diligently checked. I'll have to keep an eye to see what Nyx does. For all we know, the rabbit was on auto, searching because that's what it was told to do 2 months ago. But we don't know for sure that Nyx is still tracking it. And even if they are, Morgan, no one just waltzes out here. Nyx is on the other side of the planet. They can't get to us with ease. If they try to send someone out into the waste on their side in the hopes of them making it here in a few days, they'll be stopped by Endgame long before that. Most likely, they'll have to smuggle a team into a place like Esper on the day side, and send someone into the waste from there, hoping not to be noticed. And even then, their chances are slim.
I wanted to believe that, but they were never supposed to find me at all. And yet, their stupid retrieval unit had done it. And it was probably following a search grid created by an algorithm. If a robot could find me, how much easier would it be for a team of Espers? Lance had lived here for nearly 10 years, and I ruined that in a matter of weeks. The bigger problem was that if Lance was found, King was found. And if they found the mainframe, our problems would be much bigger. But even knowing that, I was more upset because Lance already had a personal history with Nyx. A tragic and horrifying one. And I'd brought all that straight back to him. I didn't want to make him relive any of that trauma. Do we just sit here and wait for them, hoping for the best?
We can be a little more proactive than that. I'll watch their movements, carefully.
That's our warning system. But what do we do?
I don't know.
He was silent a moment.
I don't know.
That question dampened the mood, and neither of us spoke for a while. The longer I sat there, the more that trembly, panicked feeling built in the pit of my stomach. My blood pressure was rising by the minute, the more I thought of what might happen. Out of nowhere, Lance stood, then pulled me to my feet, smiling.
Let's get some fresh air. Don't forget, Morgan, we're Espers too. They won't sneak up on us, and once we know what they're doing, we'll come up with a plan. In the meantime, there's no reason to spend each moment in agony waiting for things we don't know.
He was right. Though it was difficult to set it aside that easily, I let him pull me to my feet and lead me outside. But I couldn't just put it from my mind and wipe away the anxiety. We sat outside for a long time in silence, just watching the sunset. I didn't feel like talking, and Lance, I think, was trying to allow me the quiet I needed. But eventually he broke the silence.
I've heard watching the sunset together is supposed to be romantic. I wonder if it still counts if the sun never actually sets.
I let out a weary laugh, allowing my head to rest on his shoulder. We can just face the other way and pretend. I appreciated his attempt to make me laugh, though it wasn't quite enough to erase the lingering anxiety. I had really thought things would be okay. I told myself they were okay so many times, and I tried so hard to move away from that incident, to focus on things here. And now this. Everything crumbled, like the world was swept from beneath me, and I was waiting for the weight of everything to crush me down again and destroy what little I'd built. I hated it. A hand went to my eyes again as I felt the sting of tears. I did not want to let this get me down. I wanted to keep my head high, but it was tough. I felt Lance's cheek against the top of my head.
Don't forget you aren't dealing with us alone this time, Morgan. Staying together through challenging times is a defining characteristic of a caring relationship, yes?
I looked up at him, and his hand found its way to my cheek. I covered it with my own and held it there. That's what I'm worried about. Dragging someone else into all this.
I helped you while knowing the risks, because I wanted to help you. And that feeling has only intensified, not diminished.
Most relationships don't involve the possibility of sparking a global war because the people looking for your girlfriend find the physical location for a planetary computer system you can control.
It's true that adds a layer of complexity. You consider yourself my girlfriend.
I like that that's what you took away from that. Lance!
Morgan, I can't stop living in the present for fear of the future. If that's all we ever do, there's no point to living at all.
I know that. I shouldn't let it overwhelm me. There's no value in that either.
I should have come up with a contingency plan for their finding you when I first brought you here. I trusted the distance, the size of the search area.
Don't go blaming yourself.
Then you don't blame yourself.
All right, I won't. The important thing is coming up with a plan now. We know their search bot found me. Is it possible to delete the recording before anyone sees it?
I've been working on it, but the system the files have gone to is heavily protected. Looking into it isn't a problem, but deleting without leaving evidence behind is the difficult part. If there is evidence of tampering, it will raise some flags. But that will be my first step. If I can remove the files before anyone takes note of them, the problem will be solved. As of now, even with my abilities.
I took his face in my hands and brought him down for a quick kiss. If it doesn't work, then we'll come up with another plan. You can only do what you can do.
At any rate, I will do my best.
He lowered his head and pressed his lips to mine again. At the sudden closeness, I let out a shuddering breath and pulled him even closer, winding my arms around him as I kissed him fiercely. Because I needed comfort. Because I loved him. So much. And I didn't want to lose him or any of this. He held me just as tight. And I couldn't help but think about what he'd said before. About how in Delphine you could only ever live by seizing each moment because you didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I pulled away, cradling his face in my hands. Dang! She said it! I love you. The words spilled out before I could stop them. I love every part of you. Everything that makes you who you are. You're such an incredible person. I ran my thumbs down his cheeks, once more awed by who he was and what he'd seen and experienced. Sometimes I can't fathom how you could find me half as incredible as I find you to be. I want to stay here with you, and I hate these people for threatening that. I pulled him close, clinging to him with all my might. I just love you so much. Lance's hands tightened around me before he pulled back just enough for his lips to crush against mine a second later. There was such tender desperation in that kiss, from both of us. Like the feelings that had been stirring between us finally spilled over. Acknowledged, named, confessed. Like all it took was the threat of losing it to make us cling to it even harder. We stayed there for a while, embracing under that red sky. Lance's lips found my ear, pressing a kiss there as he murmured his response to my sudden confession. He kissed my throat, my lips, and repeated that he loved me over and over. Oh, I was like, I hope he says that he loves you back. Yay! We went back inside to clean up, to have dinner, but the air between us had changed. There were more shy touches, gentle looks, soft kisses. And I was unsurprised when we found ourselves tangled on the sofa, unable to hold back. Can we please not do this on the sofa, please? Please, not on the sofa. Memories are haunting me. The kisses had been growing in heat and duration most of the evening, like a kindled flame waiting for the right fuel to burn out of control. There was a tacit decision that neither of us spoke aloud. Okay, it's probably gonna be fun times. I hope they move from the couch, though. Between one kiss and the next, a switch was flipped inside us both. Lance had been teasing me all evening with occasional feather-light kisses to the side of my neck before pulling away again. Almost like experimenting. His lips had found their way there again, and this time he didn't pull from me. I tipped my head to the side, fingers buried in his silky curls. I let out a breathy gasp when his mouth met my collarbone, and this time Lance's hand splayed across my back and held me closer. The kisses shifted from gentle, a little playful, to fiery as he gravitated to the one spot at the base of my throat that sent ripples of fire through my veins. One of his hands cradled the back of my head while his mouth edged lower. And my breath was quickly coming in ragged gasps. Lance found my lips again, tongue seeking gentle entry. He said my name once. Then everything from the sofa to the bedroom was a blur. Oh, thank God we're in the bedroom. Thank you, Lance. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. I was against a door frame at one point as he held me tenderly, hands holding me close as his lips and tongue traced a heated path down the center of my chest. Our lips met again as we passed through the bedroom, then his hands found my face once more as we kissed again and again. He tasted like cinnamon and something deeper and equally spicy. I pulled him close, holding him to me until that taste was the only thing I could sense. Our bodies aligned tight against one another. The pressure of every part of him against me sent sparking, fiery yearning. Something hard pressed against me. What it could be, who could say? Testament of his growing need. And I needed him just as badly. His hand slid up my back, causing me to arch into him, and his lips found my neck again, tongue dipping into the hollow of my throat before suckling at the skin. I let out a quiet whimper, fingers clenching in the fabric of his shirt, tugging to free him from it. He separated from me just far enough to pull it over his head before arms tightened around my body, lifting as he moved me clumsily towards the bed. His scalding skin pressed to mine, and now I let my hands move over his shoulders. The backs of my legs hit the bed, and he lowered me to the mattress. Lance held himself above me, one of his knees situating itself between my legs at the edge of the bed.
Morgan, it's been a long time. For me.
It's been a while for me, too.
I've been trying to hold back.
I pulled him down for another starving kiss. Then stop holding back. Whoa! Wow! Whoa! Wow! Whoa! Wow! Holy... This guy! His CGs are just incredible! It just keeps getting better and better. Dang! Lance set his hands on the bed, leaning me back enough I had to wrap my arms around him to keep from falling backwards. One of his hands insinuated itself at the small of my back, holding me in place.
Are you sure?
Yes. When my back hit the bedding, I finally slid my hands over his shoulders into the muscles of his chest. I looked up at him and our eyes met, his taking on that faint glow they always had in dim lighting. His teeth flashed over his lower lip as I leaned up and pressed my mouth against his warm skin, so beautiful in the soft light. A quiet breath escaped him. My tongue flicked against his chest, teasing just a little. He jerked slightly, a low groan rumbling through him. One of his hands went to the back of my head, working little circles against my scalp. I trailed soft kisses down his abdomen, over scars and over the smooth contours of his body. His breathing hitched as my lips passed over his lower stomach. I looked up at him. His head was back, lips parted with heated breaths coming in rapid pants. Heat swirled in my stomach at that look on his face. I dipped my head lower, slipping my hands to the back of his hips to press him closer as I kissed him again through his clothes. A deep groan tore itself from his lips this time.
Morgan.
Our eyes met again as I pulled loose the fastening at his waist. He said nothing, but had a pleading, uncertain look on his face as I pressed my mouth to his skin again. Fluttering spirals of warmth radiated through me with every soft groan he tried, and failed, to bite back. The next time our eyes met, Lance moved to capture my face and shift his body so he could kiss me again. I pushed myself back further on the bed, dragging him with me. There was a soft whisper of movement as Lance slid out of the rest of his clothes. He kissed me again, one of his hands making their way to my torso, resting on my lower ribcage before sliding up. There was almost tender reverence as he touched me, then moved his head to kiss down my throat, over my collarbone and to my breasts. I shut my eyes, letting my head fall back at the feel of his lips, the wetness of his tongue and heat of his breath against me. He looked at me once, and now it was my turn to look back, pleading and needing. Lance lowered his head again, pushing my waistband a little lower before his fingers found the fastening to work it loose. The sensual movement of his head and agonizing sensation of his tongue against my skin sent me reeling headlong into desperate need for him. When his lips met mine again, the coolness of the air was offset by the heat of his body against mine. My hands found his back, fingertips catching on the myriad scars there. There was no sound but our unified breath, soft flesh against flesh, the sound of rustling blankets. Aww, look at that. That's one of my favorite hand-holding ones, I think. His hand found mine, pressing it to the bedding as our fingers entwined. And in the dim light, I could only see his eyes alternating open then shut as he moved above me. We kissed over and over, muffling each needy moan or breathy sigh. If I could have, I would have slowed time to make it last so much longer than it did. But for the moment I could believe there was nothing in the world but him and his tender movements and touch. For that time, it was the happiest I'd been in a very long while. Phew. I think that's probably the spiciest one so far. My cheeks are a little warm after that one. Yee. Good job, Lance. You're killing it. It felt like a long time passed, but in reality, the time that passed was all too short. Lance and I were lying half-covered, a tangled mess of bare limbs. His head was resting on my shoulder as I played with his hair, staring at the ceiling. It would have been lovely to bury myself in that moment forever, but all too soon reality was back.
I should move.
His voice was adorably sleepy. It brought an instant smile to my face. You don't have to. You're comfortable.
I'm going to fall asleep like this.
I don't mind. He propped himself up and smiled.
Even so, I'm sure the dead weight will get tiresome after a while.
He settled back down next to me, snuggling in close before he shut his eyes again. I listened to his soft, irregular breathing slow. He really did go to sleep. Another smile came to my lips as I ran my fingers through his messy hair. Funny that this man who seemed like he never slept was finally asleep before me. I just hoped I'd be able to get some sleep tonight, too. Sleep didn't come as easily as I hoped it would. I lay awake for hours, mind relentlessly returning to the situation at hand. I stopped even bothering to shut my eyes and just stared at the ceiling as if it would yield answers I couldn't find elsewhere. When I first came here, I stayed with the understanding I'd have to go back and face the situation. Then I got comfortable and thought I could stay, exile myself, and never look back. But things had caught up with me again, and staying was not the sanctuary I once thought it was. Lance would do anything he could to make me happy. I already knew that about him, had known it about him the whole time. I kept having a scary thought, one that was lurking at the back of my mind and rising to the surface every time I tried to sleep. Maybe it was time to go back, to turn myself into Endgame. Don't say that after everything that just went down this route, girl. Everything that happened this chapter, even. After all that, like, ay. You would destroy Lance. No. Better to go out in a blaze of glory than to go back to Endgame at this point. You know what? At least you'd be together. Heck it. Who cares? To let them know Lance's location might have been compromised. Lance had said Magnus Ulrich knew about him. I could tell him Nyx might have found his location. Endgame could protect him better than I ever could. But Lance wouldn't agree to something like that. He'd try to talk me out of it. Try to convince me there was another way, even if he didn't know it. But if we waited too long, it would be too late for them to help. The frightening part was knowing I could just go without telling him. That would be even worse! If you do that, I'm crawling through the screen to slap you, girl. I could leave and ensure he would be safe, and there was no reason for anyone to ever bother him again. But if they've seen his face, they're gonna come here anyway, and then he's just a king, and he can't, like, take care of himself by himself like that. He has a better chance if you're here with him, girl. Oh, no. This is a terrible plan. What are you doing? What are you doing? I rolled over, looking at his sleeping face in the darkness. He would be hurt if I left like that. You think? I didn't even want to think about how hurt he'd be. But I also didn't feel we could push aside the possibility of needing Endgame's help for this. There was more at stake than our relationship. And I wasn't sure he could accept that, because it might mean that I would have to give up staying here. Do I need to think about it? You know what? I don't think I need to think about it. Let's talk to Lance about things and make a decision together instead of going out like self-sacrificing hero style. Eh? Okay? Okay. I would have to wait and talk to Lance in the morning. There was no way I was doing anything tonight. Much less something exceptionally rash. At least you're cognizant of that fact. I reached a hand out and lightly brushed my fingers across his cheek. He looked young when he was asleep. Like everyone did, I suppose. A smile crossed my face and vanished. Lance said we would deal with the situation together. I would trust that. I owed him that, and I wanted to do that. There were other options besides turning myself in. And even if we contacted Endgame, Therio had talked about becoming a citizen to lessen their jurisdiction over me. He had mentioned the process taking time, but maybe there was a way to speed it up. I'd bring it up in the morning, to let Lance know contacting Endgame was on the table, no matter the fallout. But I knew he'd consider it a last resort if there wasn't a way to ensure they wouldn't haul me off to Esper jail, or wherever they took someone who eluded them as long as I had. I shut my eyes, hoping sleep would just come soon and erase everything for a while. Especially because I still had that annoying habit of waking far too early whether I slept or not.